So this Russian collusion thing has been absurd from the start. I mean, it always was. The idea of Donald Trump as Boris Badenov, calling Putin on the phone. It was based on the idea that he kind of kept saying nice things about Putin. But Obama said nice things about Putin. George W. Bush said nice things about Putin. American leaders are naive when it comes to dealing with gangsters. Putin is a gangster. His government is a gangster government. It is the government of basically a czar brought back. This is a people who have never been free. They had a czar, then they had communism, which is a form of slavery. Whether it's communism or socialism, it's a form of slavery. They've never been free, and they had a couple of minutes of freedom, and Putin took advantage of the fact that they were disgruntled and unhappy and basically sold the country to his friends, and Americans have been falling for his routine for years. I mean, for one administration after another has fallen for him. Trump was just the latest in the gang. But now, last week, Richard Burr, who is the chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, and they have been doing a very bipartisan investigation, unlike the investigation in the House, which has been, that McCarthyite Adam Schiff is running it now, but he's always been kind of leaking information and using it for totally political purposes and grandstanding. The Senate investigation has been quiet and mostly bipartisan. And last week, Senator Richard Burr, who's the chairman, the Republican chairman, he kind of suggested, look, we haven't found anything. We have no proof of collusion. Now, Mark Warner, who is the ranking Democrat, says he disagrees. He says the investigation is ongoing, but NBC has had an exclusive report from Ken Dilanian saying that he's got sources on the committee who tell him that both sides are now saying that after 2 years, the Senate Intelligence has wrapped up its investigation and they have no evidence that Trump colluded with Russia. All of you will get a refund for the money they spent on this investigation. I'm just joking. But let's just listen for a minute to Ken Dilanian telling a very disappointed MSNBC anchor that they've got nothing.
After 2 years and interviewing more than 200 witnesses, the Senate Intelligence Committee has not uncovered any direct evidence of a conspiracy between the Trump campaign and Russia. That's according to sources on both the Republican and the Democratic side of the aisle, Hallie. And careful viewers and readers will note that Senator Richard Burr, the chairman of the Intelligence Committee who leads this probe, essentially said that in an interview with another network last week. But what I've been doing since then is checking with my sources on the Democratic side to understand the full context of his remarks, because that was essentially a partisan comment from one side. But this is a bipartisan investigation, and what I found is that the Democrats don't dispute that characterization. The disagreement comes, though, over that pattern of context that we've all seen and heard about over the last few years. More than 100 contacts between Trump campaign officials and Russians. The Democrats say that those remain highly suspicious and that there's a pattern here that still raises questions. But the Republicans say that we just don't know in the end what those were. And Richard Burr said publicly, look, the motives for those are unclear.
So Ken Dilanian, they don't want to let this go. They can't let it go because they have built up this entire mythology. I mean, look, Trump won because he outsmarted a terrible, terrible candidate. I mean, Trump may not have been that great a candidate either, but he outsmarted Hillary Clinton. She was always a bad politician. She was a bad retail politician. She was a bad wholesale politician. She had a history of corruption that was as long as your arm. She had a scandal ongoing during the campaign that was a genuine scandal, a real scandal. And the fact that the Russians were diddling around trying to divide people, which they always do, I'm sure we do it to them as well. It's just spy versus spy stuff. It's not that big a deal. They just seized on that, and they have now spent millions of our dollars, chasing this down. Even Dilanian tweeted after this, to be clear, the Senate Intelligence Committee has not found evidence exonerating Trump either. So I tweeted back to him and I said, you know what? They haven't found evidence exonerating you either. You can't find evidence exonerating something from the kind of crime. I mean, there are certain crimes that if you can prove somebody else did it, then you're off the hook. If you can prove somebody else committed the murder, then you didn't commit the murder. But this kind of crime, you can't prove it didn't happen. He was talking to the Russians. He was talking to all kinds of people. He was a novice. Trump and his campaign was filled with second raters and novice people because none of the mainstream Republicans, the professionals, would join the campaign. So he was stuck with a lot of people who were kind of sleazy, like Paul Manafort. I'm sure they were talking to all kinds of people, but the idea that Trump was colluding with Russia to overturn the election, to skew the election is just a nonsense. I mean, it really is. If anybody, of course, it was Hillary Clinton who was colluding with Russia to get dirt, to get misinformation on Donald Trump. Hey, then everybody rushes out. The guys rush out to basically keep this fairy tale, this fiction going, because if they drop the fiction, if it turns out, look, they'll never find out that Trump didn't collude with the Russians. All they can find out is that they have no proof that he did. That's the best that can happen, but they're not going to let it go. They're not going to let it go. Here's just a sample. Here is John Brennan, the ex-CIA chief who lied to Congress about the fact that he was spying on him. This is the guy who sat down and said, oh no, we're not spying, while he was crawling around inside their computers. Here he is desperately trying to keep this illusion alive.
It was collusion in plain sight. Donald Trump at the end of July openly called on Russian intelligence to find Hillary Clinton's emails. There were engagements at the Trump Tower. There were the back and forth between various individuals who were affiliated with the Trump campaign and Russian individuals. That collusion, I think, is quite obvious and apparent. What the Mueller team is doing is trying to determine whether or not the engagement rises to the level of criminal conspiracy, whether they violated the law. You can collude without violating the law. And I know the Senate Intelligence Committee came out and said they found no direct evidence of criminal conspiracy, but that's not the Senate Intelligence Committee's remit. It is the FBI and the special counsel's team to do the criminal investigation. I was hoping that the Senate Intelligence Committee was going to look at what the Russians actually did. How did the government respond? The intelligence community, the law enforcement community. What can we do to better prepare ourselves in the future to prevent the Russians from interfering in the election? Do the intelligence community agencies need to have greater authorities or tools or capabilities? Does there need to be greater collaboration between the federal government and the states in order to ensure that the voting infrastructure is going to be better protected? These are the things that our congressional committees should be doing. But criminal investigation should be left to the Department of Justice, the FBI, and the special counsel.
So what's he going to do when Mueller comes out and doesn't have anything? I think the Mueller investigation is going to be a bust as well. Now, who knows what Mueller will say? You know, John Dowd, who used to be Trump's lawyer, and he claims that he has seen everything that Mueller has. He's seen all the evidence, and he says he is predicting now that they may not even issue a report because they've got nothing. They have got nothing. Here he is talking to ABC.
I will be shocked if anything regarding the president is made public, other than we're done.
You know,
the president has and his lawyers have been fairly transparent. I mean, it's, you know, everybody knows who the witnesses were, and the White House documents are another question, particularly the communications by counsel with the president, which we gave to Bob. So, I mean, Bob, there's no time in history has anybody had this kind of look at communications with the president.
Do you respect what Mueller is doing? I know you know Mueller well.
Well, I respected it in the beginning, and I started out, and it's my style is I always trust the other side until I didn't. In my opinion, on March 5th, we were done. He had everything. He said he had everything.
So his point about this is that this is like a grand jury investigation that is secret. It is kept from the public because you don't want to, you know, as the old saying goes, you can indict a ham sandwich, and you don't want the people to get the impression that people are guilty. But that's exactly the impression, of course, they're trying to create. That is the idea. That is the story that they want to tell. And of course, the whole thing about this, the whole thing that's so unfair is, look, the Democrats are telling a story, the Republicans are telling a story. I'm not going to tell you that the Republicans come out and they're shining angels of truth. That's nonsense. That's not the point. The only point is that this massive, massive organization for communication, the American media, is almost entirely all on one side, and is basically ginning this fiction up. It is making sure that everyone hears this fiction and no one hears anything contradictory. You know, Adam Schiff, Tail Gunner Adam, as I call him, because he really does remind me of McCarthy, of Joseph McCarthy, the old guy of, like, I'm holding in my hand an envelope filled with the names of communist conspirators. He keeps going on television and saying that he's got the proof, he's seen the proof. So now he goes on Meet the Press And he says, oh, no, we're actually expanding our investigation. He's on the House Intelligence Committee. Now we're going to get his tax returns. We're going into everything, his shoe size. We're going to find out everything about him. Adam Schiff is going to be hanging outside Trump's window, peeking through to see what's going on in his bedroom. Here's Schiff on Meet the Press. And then I want to tell you what's so startling about this interview.
Our priority is to make sure the President of the United States is working in the national interest, that he is not motivated by some pecuniary interest or fear of compromise or actual compromise. That's the length and breadth of it. So in terms of the President's business, we're not interested in our committee in whether he's a tax cheat or he's not worth what he says he is or those issues. What we're interested in is, does the president have business dealings with Russia such that it compromises the United States? And the perfect example is something we know about already. And that is, as a presidential candidate, while he was telling the country he had no business dealings with Russia, he was pursuing the most lucrative deal, I think, of his life and seeking the Kremlin's help to make it happen. That's a different form of collusion, but it is equally compromising to the country because it means the President of the United States is looking out for his bank account and not for the United States of America.
Now he's criminalizing Trump's business dealings, and remember, Obama brought businessmen over to Russia to try and do the reset. Remember the reset? He was bringing them over because he got taken by Putin too. These guys are constantly being taken by this guy because he's a good gangster. But what's shocking about this, and James Freeman pointed this out in the Wall Street Journal, what is shocking about this is 2 years ago, Adam Schiff went on that same show with Chuck Todd and said, I have evidence of more than circumstantial evidence, he said, that associates of Donald Trump colluded with Russia to rig the 2016 election. That's what he said, to rig the 2016 election. And he had more than circumstantial evidence. He has never, just like Joseph McCarthy, has never produced that evidence. And Chuck Todd didn't say a word about it. He didn't say 2 years ago you were here and you said this. Let's go back. Let's find out, what you've got. It's time for you to show your cards. He didn't. He never will. None of them ever will, because this is the way they tell the story. This is the way they create the fiction. They not only tell only one side, but they don't tell the other side. It's the same, it's two sides of one coin. They not only constantly tell you about this horrible Russian collusion that went on, but anything that disproves that, or at least shows that it didn't happen, or shows that there's no proof that it happens, that gets suppressed or explained away. And that is the thing. And meanwhile, only evil Fox News, the mean, nasty, rotten conservative Fox News, is reporting what I think is the genuine story, which is the FBI's malfeasance on this entire thing. The investigation never should have started. And while the investigation was going on, they were basically covering up for Hillary Clinton. This is from Fox News, newly released internal FBI emails, and these had to be pried out of the FBI by Judicial Watch. They show the agency's highest-ranking officials scrambled to answer to Hillary Clinton's lawyer in the days prior to the 2016 presidential election. The same day, then FBI Director James Comey sent that bombshell letter to Congress saying that he had to review hundreds of thousands of new classified emails found on Anthony Weiner's laptop. But at least Anthony Weiner's a guy you can trust. The trove of documents turned over to the FBI also included discussions, listen to this, by former FBI lawyer Lisa Page, right? She's the lover girl who was with Strzok and sending texts back and forth saying, we've got to stop this evil Donald Trump from taking over our government. Discussions by former FBI lawyer Lisa Page concerning a potential quid pro quo between the State Department and the FBI, in which the FBI would agree to effectively hide the fact that a Clinton email was classified in exchange for more legal attaché positions that would benefit the FBI abroad and allow them to send more agents to countries where the FBI's access is ordinarily restricted. They were dealing with them to cover up for Hillary Clinton. The FBI would cover up for Hillary Clinton if, when Hillary Clinton got elected, or the State Department, which Hillary Clinton had run, would help them out with these attaché positions they wanted. There will come a time when this will be reported as one of the worst cases of press malfeasance ever. I mean, really, this is a case of press malfeasance that they have not hunted down, the FBI, and on the excuse of not wanting to damage the trust that the American people have in their institutions, which, by the way, is the job description of a journalist. A journalist's job is to damage the trust you have in your institutions, so you keep watch on them and make them feel afraid. The government should be afraid of the people, not the other way around. The government should be afraid of journalists. Do you think Barack Obama's government was afraid of journalists? I don't think so.